Welcome to another episode of Big Money Buys. If you've never seen this video from my channel before, I think that you're in for a treat because in this video, essentially what we do is break down the 10 highest selling books from eBay. And there are some interesting things that are happening in this month's list. Specifically, we think that a couple of books that appeared on last month's list are actually back. Yes, some people appear to be flipping some high dollar books, and they actually sold this month for more than what they sold for last month. This list also looks a little more diverse than some of the ones that we've done in the past, but by and large, Marvel continues to dominate the list. Another thing that we noticed is that CBCS actually made the list in the #1 spot. This is something that's a little unusual because typically we see a lot of CGC books, but this month we actually see the #1 book coming from CBCS. And again, there are some other little nuances that we are going to talk about, but I want to encourage you to stay tuned for this month's Big Money Buys for April. Number 10 on the list is X-Men issue #1. And this book certainly is no stranger to the list. It is on here every single month that we do this. And rightly so, because this is a fantastic team, a fantastic comic that will probably be on the list for some time in the future. This specific book, this copy of X-Men issue #1 actually sold mid-month on April 13th for $27,133. It sold as an auction with a total of 46 bids. This book was a CGC 5.0 with off-white to white pages. And again, this is not the only copy of X-Men #1 that we are going to talk about. There are a few more, and there are some interesting differences that we're going to see, and you'll see what I mean in just a second. Number 9 on the list is Avengers issue #4, and this is the first Silver Age appearance of Captain America. This specific book that we're looking at right now is actually a yellow label that was signed by Stan Lee on the back cover. Drilling down into the data a little bit more, this copy of Avengers issue #4 sold for $27,500 as a buy it now, also on April 13th of this year. This was a 9.4 from CGC with white pages. And based upon the data that we were able to find, what we see is that 35 blue label copies of a 9.4 are presently on the census. And there are actually 29 books that are graded higher than this copy, with 5 of them being a 9.8. Definitely a really cool book that I wish I had in my collection, but I don't have that kind of money to spend on a single comic. With that said, let's look at number 8 on the list. Number 8 on the list is another X-Men issue #1. This specific book actually sold for $28,100 as an auction with 36 bids on April 25th. And the interesting thing about this book is that it sold for more money than number 10 on the list. This book that we're talking about right now was also a CGC 5.0, but this copy actually had cream to off-white pages. Again, this book sold a few days after number 10 on the list, had worse page color, and actually sold for more money. I'm not sure what that says, but that is an important thing that we wanted to point out. Number 7 on the list is another X-Men book, but this one happens to be giant size X-Men. In this book, a CGC 9.6 sold as a make-an offer for $28,250. The original asking price, $30,250, so someone saved themselves a couple of bucks on this really awesome book, which happens to be the first appearance of the new X-Men, including Storm, Nightcrawler, Colossus, and is also the second appearance of everyone's favorite guy, Wolverine. Number 6 on the list is honestly a book that I never thought that I would see on eBay. I assumed that books like this always went to Heritage or Comic Link or something like that. Yet, here we have Submariner issue number 1. And this book sold for $30,000 as a make-an offer on April 18th. This book was originally released from Timely Comics, which went on to become Marvel in 1941. The original asking price for this book was $39,999.95. It was a CGC 6.5 blue label with cream to off-white pages. Now, here's what's really interesting about this book. When you start to look at some of the census data, I think that that's where things get interesting. So let's talk about that. When you look at the data, what you see is that there are a total of only 130 copies of this book on the CGC census, and only 70 of them have blue labels. 7 copies of this book exist at a CGC 6.5 with 19 higher graded copies. In fact, there are 2 copies, 9.2 on the list. This is a book from the 40s and there's 9.2s. That is crazy. And again, I would love to own this book. That will probably not happen, but it is definitely a really cool book to talk about. With that said, let's look at the next book on the list. Number 5 on the list is another X-Men book, and it is also another 5.0. This is the third 5.0 X-Men issue number 1 that is on this month's list. This specific book actually sold for $30,100 at an auction with 59 total bids on April 18th. This copy actually had off-white to white pages. And what I can tell you is that it appears that the person that bought the 10th book on this list actually had the best deal. And I say that because they paid the lowest price for an X-Men issue number 1 5.0, but they also received the better page color. The other 2 had off-white to white. So definitely a smoking deal out there. And this also speaks to the importance of kind of looking around to see what's out there if you're going to pull the trigger. And I wonder if the people that picked up the second copies of X-Men issue number 1 5.0 were also bidding on the first one and actually missed it back on April 13th. Just something that is on my mind. It's something that I've been pondering. With that said, let's get to the next book on the list. Coming in 4th place is a really nice book. We are talking about Tomb of Dracula issue number 10, the first appearance of Blade. And I don't know about you, but I am excited for this movie to be released at some point. I guess in maybe 2023, 2024, possibly 2025. I don't know. It doesn't matter because someone picked up a really awesome copy of this book, specifically a 9.8 with white pages. CGC 9.8 with white pages they snagged on April 18th as a buy it now for $36,000. And at present, there are 47 blue label CGC 9.8s on the census. But get this, there is also a 9.9. That is crazy. That is crazy. Whoever owns that is incredibly lucky. Definitely a really cool book. Number 3 on the list is another X-Men issue number 1, but this one is actually a 6.0, and it represents a pretty big jump in price from the 5.0s that we've been talking about thus far. This specific copy, this CGC 6.0 with white pages, actually sold on April 10th for $40,000 as a make-an offer now. And I want to highlight here that there are 151 CGC 6.0 blue labels on the census with approximately 525 copies that are on the census that are higher than a 6.0. I have one of these books, but I do not have a 6.0, and that is a wonderful, wonderful price for this specific comic. With that said, let's look at number 2 on the list. Number 2 on the list is my personal favorite. It is Amazing Fantasy issue number 15. The first appearance of Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man. This book right here actually sold for $45,950. It is a CGC 4.0 blue label with cream to off-white pages. The original asking price for this book was $48,955. Now, what we don't know is whether this book was relisted or whether it was a quick flip. It is possible that this is the same book that was offered up last month and is now back again. And if that is indeed the case, what we know is that that last book sold for $39,500 on March 21st. And so that is a nice increase from last month to this month if it is indeed the same book. We can also make the same point about the number 1 book on the list. And as I alluded to earlier in the video, the number 1 book is actually a CBCS book, the only CBCS book on the list for this month. And that number 1 book is Giant Size X-Men issue number 1. This CBCS book was a 9.8 with white pages that sold for $49,100 as a buy it now on April 18th. This book actually sold for more than $20,000, higher than the CGC 9.6 that is on the list. Here's what's interesting. It appears that maybe this book was either relisted or was a quick flip for someone. Just 5 weeks ago, this same book, same grade, sold for $34,999. Now, 5 weeks later, we might be seeing the same book sell again for $15,000 more than what it sold for when it was ranked 6th just a few short weeks ago. Again, some interesting stuff that is happening with this list. I'm not quite sure what to make of it, but the data is out there and people can noodle it and make up their mind as they kind of interpret this for themselves. So the last thing that I want to do is to provide you with a little bit of insight into some additional big money buys that did not make the list for one reason or another. In the case of this first big money bonus buy, it is original art, and we don't capture original art, but if we did, this piece would have broken into the top 10. I am specifically talking about a joint project between Humberto Ramos and Ryan Stegman. They specifically worked on the cover art for Venom issue number 35. This cover art sold on eBay for $27,855 in an auction benefiting charity. One of the other things that I wanted to mention to you was that Heritage has actually broken some records. They sold over $12 million in original art and comics in the month of April. That is a lot of comic book related stuff being sold. And this $12 million represents all kinds of new records being set right now. And there are actually 2 sales that took place in the month of April that I wanted to make mention of. The first of which was a copy of Lobo issue number 1 from the 1990s, specifically the cover art that sold for $192,000. The second thing that I wanted to highlight is a comic book, specifically a CGC 7.5 copy of More Fun Comics issue number 73. This was a DC book that actually sold for $111,000 and represents the first appearance of Aquaman and also Green Arrow. So some DC stuff actually happening as well, so we wanted to make sure that we represented that. Hopefully you all enjoyed this look at the big money buys for the month of April, And if you did, I want to encourage you to hit the thumbs up button, leave a comment behind, let us know what you think about these big money buys, and be sure to tune in next month when we do this all over again. And as always, feel free to reach out to me directly if you need to, and you can find me on Instagram at Regie Collects. Take care.